Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time to join us for this presentation of Parker's industry survey result on the trends and challenges in life science automation, robotics, and motion control. I'm your moderator, Ed Biller, Associate Editor for Med Device Online. Med Device Online is a resource for anyone in the medical device industry, from design engineers to executives, offering insights on product design, navigating regulatory pathways, and achieving success in clinical trials. We're hopeful that you will gain insight from the input Parker has gathered from your peers. In addition to the survey results, Parker has supplemented the information with both face-to-face and customer interviews. Surveyors asked two main questions. First, what are the most promising trends around robotics, automation, and motion control? And second, what are your critical challenges in the implementation of these technologies? Parker is sharing this information as part of an overall market strategy to serve not only as a supplier, but as a partner. We are hopeful that you will find as much value in this data as we have. Parker is a $13 billion global corporation with more than 60,000 employees. Parker's business is built around 9 core technologies that focus on solving the world's greatest engineering challenges. Today, we are going to focus on the life science market from the perspective of electromechanical technology. Our presenter today is Brian Handerhan. Brian is a business development manager with 22 years of experience implementing automation across a broad range of industries. Prior to his move into this life science-focused position, Brian built his knowledge serving in both operational and management positions. Ultimately, as business unit manager for the linear mechanics business, he led a sharp growth in life science OEM business based on internal processes and engineering partnerships.
Thank you, Ed, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today for this presentation of the results of our industry survey on automation, robotics, and motion control for life sciences. Let's begin the review of the survey with the survey data with a general understanding of the respondents. So all the respondents were categorized into 3 groups depending on their job function. The technical decision makers are engineers that have responsibility for specifying components in instrument designs. The business decision makers are managers with responsibility for engineering quality operations. In certain organizations, we found that these executives have more decision-making oversight than in others. The influencer group consisted of individuals that worked at instrument manufacturers but didn't have the decision-making responsibility for the design. The majority of these respondents were in product management roles or were scientists that were working closely with the engineering teams. Although not decision makers, they did have a great deal of influence over defining the needs of the instrument and the design in general. So now let's take a look at how each of these groups responded to our questioning regarding trends and challenges. The first objective of our survey was to understand what industry trends are contributing the most to the development of effective life science instrument solutions. So regarding trends, we were able to classify all the trends into 4 major categories. An overwhelming 84% of the responses focused on a combination of the automation category and the transformative category. Answers relating to organizational structure and communication technologies received relatively low levels of interest. The automation technologies received the majority with 52% of the responses regarding positive trends. This category was comprised of 5 major elements. Modular automation, which is the use of pre-engineered elements that have defined performance characteristics which allow for more rapid design with fewer iterations and come with a level of verification and validation. Miniaturization, which is the shrinking of mainly the motion and fluidics components to enable the developers to reduce their overall instrument size so they're consuming less laboratory space, also requiring less reagents and enabling them to process smaller samples. Collaborative robotics, which is a move towards motion that is intrinsically safe, which allows for less guarding and facilitates more interaction between the lab technician and the instrument. Distributed motion, which is a trend towards decentralizing the control of the instrument, such that smaller isolated controls are positioned throughout the instrument to manage subsystems and report status back to central controlling. This approach provides the benefit of simplified cabling. And last, servo positioning. Although stepper remains a technology of choice for a majority of the axes of motion inside the instruments, there's ever-increasing requirements for precision and robust dynamics and increased power density, which is driving instrument manufacturers more towards servo technology. So the second category was Transformative Technologies, which came in a dominant second with 32% of the responses. This category is made up of 3 game-changing technologies that haven't transformed the industry yet, but have the potential to do so in the coming years. The details behind the transformative trends were lab on chip, the idea of scaling a lab process down to a chip format to reduce the volumes required down to the picoliter level and simplify the associated handling process. Internet of Things and cloud connectivity, which is the networking of devices to achieve greater value through the exchange of data, and big data, which is the collection and use of data sets that are so large that just a few years ago they couldn't have been handled by computing technology. So looking at the detailed level responses, modular automation, miniaturization, and lab on chip commanded the largest individual votes. Modular automation received 24% of the total votes, miniaturization 14%, and lab on chip rounded out the top 3 with 13% of the votes. In discussing the meaning and use of modular automation with respondents, it was clear that the concept applied to both pre-engineered subsystems like off-the-shelf actuators and assemblies, and also purpose-built or custom-built automation that could be reapplied for future generations of the same instrument, or could be applied across multiple instrument platforms. The goal of modular automation was to accelerate both the design and qualification process by being able to utilize pre-designed, pre-qualified nature of the product. Leveraging modular automation was also identified by OEM managers as having the positive impact of allowing them to attack lower volume applications that could not normally be justified. This created additional customer value because of their ability to supply more complete laboratory automation solutions. Modular automation was identified as a key tool in reducing overall product development time because this technology can be easily reapplied in future designs, allowing for reduced verification, validation, and qualification cycles. Sorry about that. So when talking further with the respondents on the idea of miniaturization, the conversation focused on a couple of core areas of the machine: the motion elements of the machine and the fluidics elements of the machine. The idea of miniaturization also had a couple of different meanings depending on the respondents. The first and most prevailing meaning was the idea of shrinking the overall size of the instrument so that it had more functionality and consumed less overall space within the laboratory. Additionally, there was a second focus of miniaturization, which was to reduce the sample size and the volumes of reagents. There were three key areas where respondents focused on in terms of achieving the concept of miniaturization. The first was to find motion and fluidics components and systems that consumed less overall space and provided the same or greater functionality. The second was to leverage elements that could more easily be integrated throughout the machine where space allowed, for more of a distributive architecture. And the last was to look at subsystem level suppliers that could provide not only a motion or fluidic module, but include other elements of the machine integrated with the technology components to minimize the overall space consumed. Miniaturization was identified as helping instrument manufacturers meet the demand for smaller instruments that consume less laboratory space, consume less reagents, and require smaller test samples. From the end user perspective, this was identified as critical to reducing the overall cost of ownership of an instrument. So as we look at the details of the results of the trends, we reviewed the data, also looking at it from a job function perspective. The technical decision makers came in with a higher vote percentage for each of the top 4 answers. So they were really focused on those top 4 items. Modular automation, miniaturization were still number 1 and number 2 respectively, with miniaturization gaining 10% from the overall population. Additionally, big data moved up from 5th spot to the 3rd spot. The business decision makers also voted for modular automation in the top spot. For this managerial focus group, contract manufacturing moved from 7th to 2nd, Internet of Things moved from 4th to 3rd, and collaborative robotics moved from 6th to 4th. The industry influencer group results kept all 4 of the top vote getters constant, with a minor switch in priority from miniaturization moving down to 3 and lab on chip moving up from number 2.